Reaction right now to what Donald Trump outlined. Many say the numbers add up. Others say they didn't add up. What's active accounting or dynamic accounting, static accounting. Nevertheless, Donald Trump's pointing to the fact that this is the ingredients that are going to help him get to double the growth we're experiencing now, close to 4%. We'll keep that up for a number of years, and off we go to a Reagan-like boom that will create, he says, 25 million jobs. Former CBO Director Doug Holz-Eakin joining me, Trump economic advisor Kathleen Hartnett White, Democratic strategist Michael Tobman, and last but not least, Charlie Gasparino. Doug, if I could begin with you, because I had read your musings on Donald Trump's numbers before his remarks today, at which time you had graded him a D-. I think now you're giving him an incomplete. I don't know if that's better or worse, but explain.
Well, first I'd say, I think the one thing he accomplished at the outset was to draw the strong contrast between his approach, which relies on better economic growth, which we desperately need, and the Clinton approach, where there's really no growth policy to be found whatsoever. And I think that was the first accomplishment. The second was to take seriously the notion that his plan didn't add up, and it didn't add up. This moves the static tax loss from $10 trillion down to something that looks like $2.5, maybe $3 trillion. There will be growth effects in there. I think you'll have to go through and get some details, see if it genuinely adds up. But he took it seriously, and he said, okay, we're going to have growth, but we're also going to be serious about protecting the taxpayers' dollars. And that's a big change from the last time around.
All right, some changes just so those who might have heard that was that top rate, which originally, earlier this year, Donald Trump had put up 25%, it's now up to 33%. That might have brought it down somewhat, as well as limiting rich folks' deductions. We should say you hear a lot of talk, as you know, Doug, about static versus dynamic accounting. Static
the dynamic's important.
Absolutely, because you do get that. The argument is you get some bang for the buck down the road with tax cuts. They just don't materially show up right away.
The other thing, Neil, to point out, just to point out, he really didn't change the business tax features of it much at all. And that's where the real growth elements are. So he kept the stuff that produces growth. He got rid of the stuff that really was just wasting taxpayer dollars. And I think that was the right way to go about this.
You know, it comes back, Charlie Gasparino, to paying for tax cuts. There's a school of thought that says, hey, wait a minute, tax cuts will trigger revenue, score them dynamically. In other words, the bang for the buck you get cutting the tax bucks. Others say, no, 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 it's like a program, the cost of them up front, and move on there.
Well, I think all too often we have either complete static analysis of this, meaning, you have to pay as you go for the tax cuts, or you have people that say, the supply siders, they'll say immediately you get the bang for your buck. And we do know from the Reagan years there wasn't an immediate supply side push inside of growth for the economy. So I think that's good. So you got to draw come right in the middle. I thought this was a great speech from that standpoint. Listen, I'm against his rhetoric on trade. He was light on that. I thought rhetorically the line about Flint and Mexico was amazing.
That was a great line. He teased that a little yesterday.
And it was, to me, this is music to my ears. I would wish he would stay on this topic. I wish he would give this speech every day, maybe variations, change around the words a little bit, every day until the election. And I'll tell you, given the way the economy is, the growth in the economy, the fact that people don't feel better no matter what those recent numbers came out about income inequality getting smaller, I think he can win.
Well, Mike, let me ask you about that. As a former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, who's been very critical, as you know, as have you, about the numbers that Donald Trump uses, and that Hillary Clinton and her plan to boost and help the middle class, maybe spend more money to do so, is the way to go. It's worked with Barack Obama. It will work with her. But Donald Trump is outlining a different way to improve the anemic growth we have seen, and that if you put more money in everybody's pocket, it's better than if it's in the government's pocket. What do you think of that?
Well, I certainly defer to the former CBO commissioner on the numbers. My gut is a C on the numbers for this speech, but an A for rhetoric. And I absolutely agree with my previous colleague who correctly pointed out the disconnect between recent reports that show income inequality shrinking and families making more money, but people aren't feeling that. And that disconnect is where Trump is going to thrive and pick up more votes and a stronger message and a stronger narrative in swing states. And it actually comes across, as a Democrat, it's awkward to say this, as condescending for elites and for economists to say, no, no, really, you're doing better, you're doing well. And people are looking around and saying, I don't feel like I'm doing any better. And this guy is telling me things will get better and I will feel better. So, you know, is there economic improvement in some families? Yes. Does that favor the incumbent administration and the party? Yes. But if people don't feel it, it comes across as condescending,
you
and
raise
that's
a good
dangerous.
point. And Kathleen, there is a strategy to this, and that is, I know Charlie and I were talking about, this is his wheelbarrow. This is his comfort zone, talking about these matters. You can wince a little bit at the prospect of a potential trade war in a Trump administration, whether he would slap a 35% tax on those companies like Ford that want to build cars, let's say, in Mexico and bring them back here, because Americans pay that, not the government. But having said that, and by targeting those companies, that populist pitch, there's certainly nothing elitist about that. Is that a strategy?
And you're speaking to me,
Yes, I am.
Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, reception a little bad. Yes, I think it is. And I think in the policy arena, getting away from the numbers at the heart of his efforts his intention to create jobs and really lift the ignition switch to economic growth, two elephants in the room in the policy arena: energy and the regulatory state. And I thought more than in any of his previous speeches, he really started to put some meaningful meat on the bones of those issues.
All right, now, but yeah, he might have, but again, you know, this gets debunked some people because they interpret it differently. Different accountants come up with different ways to crunch them. But Charlie, the one thing I noticed here is he wanted to go out of his way not only to get the understanding of that crowd in that room,
right,
but also to remind them, you're not going to be, you know, cozy and loving everything I'm going to tell you, including this trade thing. But it was a populist pitch.
Somewhat populist.
And I'm wondering how this resonates in the campaign.
It's going to be interesting. Listen, there's obviously a contradiction here between I mean, listen, I've been to the Economic Club in New York. I know David Malpass was sitting right behind him, so was Larry. Eating. And I don't know if Larry Kudlow was eating, but he was back there.
Well, it's better unless you had chicken wings.
Yes, that would tell you the food isn't that good.
No, of course.
Chicken wings would be an upgrade.
Sure, they're good at spreadsheets, not necessarily spaghetti.
Horrible food there.
Absolutely.
But I will say this: it is a contradiction. And you can tell, like, you know, Larry Kudlow and Malpass taking a deep breath when he started to talk about trade. You can just see them. You can see their wheels turning because they're free traders, these guys, and they're his economic team. My guess is, and I'll tell you,
reaching out to average folks.
Just so you know, everybody I talk to inside that campaign who knows him thinks that the trade stuff is pure rhetoric. They think he's full of you-know-what. He's using that as a wedge issue in these sort of battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, you name it, where there's high percentage of blue-collar people who he thinks really believes that trade is the root of
trade's what's killed them.
What created the Rust Belt. Whether you agree with that or not, I don't. I don't think NAFTA caused Detroit's demise, which Donald Trump said at one point. It's absurd. But I will say this. It's the bargain that the conservative supply-siders are making with him. They're going to suck it up and take his trade stuff, which they know is absurd. They're going to say he really doesn't mean it inside the tent. He's doing it for votes. And they're going to say, well, look at all this other stuff that he's doing, which is, you know, Reagan-esque to the max. Yeah,
let's talk a bit about the Reagan-esque aspect then, Douglas, if you can help me with some of the numbers here, because depending on how you score this, the only way you can get these deficits addressed, the only way you can pay for a lot of stuff, for all stuff, is growth. You get a boom in the economy. You double the growth rate we have now and sustain it for a few years. You really are off to the races. It can work like magic and fast. Bill Clinton discovered that. Ronald Reagan discovered that. But what we also discover in Washington is they get that extra revenue and they'll spend it and then some. He didn't really fret much about deficits. He didn't fret much. He talked about the debt, but he didn't talk about taking a lot of this to pay it down.
Right.
Should we worry about that?
Yes.
Or is that too boring?
Oh, yeah, it's totally boring, but I want you to worry about it anyway. No, whoever wins is going to inherit from this president a mess, quite frankly. One in which deficits will reach $1 trillion on their watch over the next 8 years, one where the debt's on an unsustainable track. And one of the difficulties that Mr. Trump has is he's pledged not to touch Social Security that's growing at 6% a year, or Medicare that's growing at 5.9, or Medicaid that's growing at 5.2, all of which are much faster than even his best economic growth would produce. So it's hard to make any progress on the fundamental problem they inherit when even growth can't catch up with it. So you got to get serious about these programs. There's nothing about that on either side.
Doug, can't you get growth going first? I mean, I think.
Well, you got to do it, Charlie. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there is no substitute for growth. If we don't get better growth, they won't have the nerve to fix any of this stuff. Yeah. We need more rapid economic growth. This 2% economy is a disaster, and I applaud him for recognizing that. And I'm genuinely concerned that the Democrats have checked out on the growth front. I don't understand it.
All right, we'll watch it very closely. Again, just to remind those of you at home, you got more growth, you got more people paying taxes. You know, you help the whole enchilada here.